Thank you. You know, it's not enough to teach our children how to have good ideas. We have to help them live their good ideas. I'm an inventor, an innovator, an entrepreneur, and most importantly, an educator. I'm associate professor at a wonderful school called EAL in Denmark, where I encourage my students in business and innovation. And it's my belief that no one should be stuck with a boring job. It's also my belief that business is just an excuse to do something incredible. For the past 3 years, I've been researching independently the links between work, education, and most importantly, play. And I've found new ways to formalize the freaky, manage the mind-blowing, and structure the strange. Now, thank you. Now, most TED presenters will ask you to think about something. But today, I want you to do something. I want you to be different. Now, I know what you're thinking. We're all different, right? We're all individual. We're all unique. But in business, being different is the only thing that you've got. People always talk about their unique selling point. If you're not unique, you're irrelevant. But I want you to be different. You're probably thinking, yeah, okay, different. I've got this, no problem, I'm different. But actually, we're kind of all the same. Well, maybe you're not the same, and maybe you're not the same, but we all know the same sort of person. You know, the same sort of guy that lives the same sort of life. You've probably heard this same sort of story about the man who wakes up on the same side of the same bed. He goes downstairs and puts on the same suit. He gets in the same car and sits in the same traffic, and he finally gets to the same job that he does every day. And when he's at the same desk, he speaks to the same colleagues, he answers the same emails, he solves the same problems. And then, in the afternoon, you think up all of those same excuses to get out of the same meetings with the same bosses, talking about the same old thing. And you know what they talk about? We're all in the same boat. After that, unfortunately, you take home the same paycheck, and you drive to your same house, and at nighttime, as you lay down in the same bed, you think the same thing that you always think. Maybe tomorrow will be different. And it never is, right? Maybe you know somebody like that. And if you do identify with that, don't worry. It's not your fault. In fact, you've been trained to be that way. We're trained from our school, from the education that we receive. And I'm a teacher. I love teaching. Teachers work so hard to make a difference. But it's hard to make a difference when everything we do is the same. If you've been a student, you will know that you're in the same class with the same kinds of people for the same amount of time. You read the same textbooks in the same subjects. And then the teachers ask you the same answers for the same questions with the same deadlines. And then when you graduate, all to the same high standard, we tell you the same thing. Go out and be different. It's impossible. I mean, think about it. Schools, thank you. For better or worse, schools have become the place, the machine for the sameness. And what we really need is a machine for difference. So why would you go to school? Why would you even take an education? Because when you're a child, you know how to play. And then when you come through education, we sort of beat it out of you quite well. And so why would you do that? Well, maybe you would take an education because you think it will give you some kind of advantage. Maybe you think that you will know something that somebody else doesn't, and one day that piece of information will help you. But to a new generation of students who are growing up with new technology, they know that that's completely irrelevant. You can learn pretty much anything, pretty much anywhere, at pretty much any time, for pretty much any cost. So anybody that's charging a premium for education is going to become a dinosaur. At my school in Denmark, in EAL, I give away all of my classes for free, not just to the Danish students, but to our European and international students as well. And it's my personal belief that all education should be free, and anybody from any background of any ability, if they want to learn something, they should have the chance. Thank you. So, if you can learn anything, why would you come to school? If you can learn anything at any time, why even bother showing up for class? And it turns out that it's interesting. I thought at first that I would be preparing students for jobs, but I realized the students aren't interested in jobs. Jobs are ridiculous. Jobs are a fantasy. They're just a task to be done. They're not seen as a guarantee. They're seen as a bonus. Yeah, maybe I'll get a job, but maybe not. Maybe I'll do something different instead. And when you think about it, the education period that we put our students through is so long. Even in a typical, say, 4-year bachelor's degree, you could pick an industry that is booming when you start, and it's busting by the time that you graduate. It could be that the job that you go into isn't even invented when you start your schooling, and I think that that is fantastic. I had a wonderful student called Bonita in one of my business classes, and she was going crazy. She was having all sorts of success with a project that she'd started, and it was going completely off the scale. And I couldn't really understand what her project was. I didn't have a clue what she was doing, and I had no way to describe it to anybody else, so I'm not even going to attempt to describe it to you guys. And I said, Bonita, what are you doing that's making yourself so successful? And she said, I don't know what I'm doing. I just love doing it. And that's when I realized that I'm not training students for a job. I'm training them for an occupation. The occupation is the thing that takes over your life. The occupation is what occupies your mind. It's what occupies everything. It's when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you just can't switch yourself off. And that is the passion that drives young people. It's not about a job. It's about an occupation. How do I encourage students to have an occupation? Through work? No. Through play. Play is one of the best tools that we have. Play allows us to do so much stuff. I'm not talking about games. I'm talking about play. I'm talking about messing around, having fun, experimenting, seeing what happens when something new comes into it. For example, play allows us to experiment with all sorts of new ideas. Play allows us to generate new concepts instantly. Play gives us the flexibility to adapt to new situations, no matter what's going on in the real world. And play gives us new ways to make new teams and find new roles in the teams. Play can help us find the things that don't exist. Now, I want to test this out with you. On Monday morning, I want you to do something for me. You're all going to go to work. But when you go to work, I don't want you to work. I want you to play. And when you're busy playing at work, you'll probably get a few strange looks. If anybody asks you what you're doing, tell them that you're playing. If they don't believe you, ask them to join in. It will really change their perceptions. Let's get this play movement going. And I do this with our students. I take them in to all sorts of different businesses, along with all my other fantastic colleagues at the school. And so we allow our students to play with all sorts of businesses, with all sorts of ideas. So it could be that one week they're designing new concepts for a haunted house. The next week they're designing incubators for premature babies in a hospital. They're not interested in the financial reward. They're interested in doing something different. You might have heard the phrase, never do the same thing twice, but I like to believe, never do the same thing once. It's very important. When you do this, you realize that people are motivated by happiness and self-fulfillment, and not profit, not job security. Young people realize that play is more important than the bottom line. And what does that mean? If we're entering a world where the next generation of workers is going to be more interested in play than in work, well, it means all sorts of things. The first thing it means is it's completely the death of the boring job. You'll never be stuck in a boring job again when you start to play. It also means that maybe the workplace is the playground of the future. Or maybe the playground is the workplace of the future. I'm not quite sure, but there'll be some kind of merging in there, definitely. And you might think it's irresponsible to teach students how to play. I should be teaching them how to work. I should be teaching them, really solid skills to get some jobs. And I think about that, and I realize that it's completely the other way around. It's irresponsible to teach students to do a task that should be done rather than do something for fun. Here's why. A recent survey in America of American workers showed that 70% of American workers were either not engaged or actively disengaged in their job. That means that for every 3 people that love their job, there's 7 people that completely hate their job. Isn't that fantastic? Maybe you know some of these people. Maybe you've worked with a few. And when you think about it, when 70% of the workforce hates their job, what does that do for innovation? What does that do for business? What does that do for the economy? And what does that do for us ourselves? It's a terrible situation. Being professional is just a secret code. It's a code that means follow the rules, do what's expected of you. But those rules have not served us all that well so far. It's time to get rid of the rules, it's time to throw them away, and it's time to find our own unique solutions to our own unique problems in our own unique ways. So the next time you want to improve your work, improve your play. Here's some examples of how I've been doing it with my students. Maybe you can take some inspiration from this. All it takes is to be just a little bit different. You don't have to be really different, just do things a little bit differently. And a really good example is I have some wonderful entrepreneurship students, and I recently set them a task, a bit of homework. I asked them to write a report and then to hand the report in to me. And that's a perfectly normal homework assignment. But I thought about, where should they hand in the report? Should they hand it in our little school in Denmark? That's okay, that's normal, but it's not different. So how about we hand it in, I don't know, the Stratosphere Tower, the tallest building in Las Vegas? That would be a pretty good location to hand in your report. And whilst you're there, why don't you write in your report exactly what it was that you had to do to get all the way to Las Vegas? So students had complete free reign, and they created their own companies, they found their own sponsorship, and they found their own way to Las Vegas. It was absolutely fascinating, because when we were at the top of this very, very tall skyscraper, and the students all handed in their papers to me, I went through and graded them, and the student with the highest grade was actually fortunate enough to then be able to bungee jump the 800 feet from the top to the bottom. Now, I'm not sure if that's an incentive or a disincentive for learning, but I tell you what, it's a lesson that you'll never forget, and that's what it's all about, playing. And play is more important than the bottom line. What about a more serious subject? I also teach some interaction and computer programming. And computer programming is a really serious subject. It takes real analytical skills and a lot of brain power. And I had a group of students who wanted to learn something very technical. If any of you are into programming, you'll know object-oriented programming. It's a little bit technical. It's a little bit tricky if you've never done it before. And I thought, a nice way to start doing this is by programming a computer game, like, I don't know, Space Invaders. Everybody loves a game of Space Invaders. Let's do Space Invaders. But before we even start to program it, we're going to have to know what it means to be a space invader. And what do you mean, to be a space invader? Are you kidding me? And so I created a game called Human Space Invaders. It's just like regular Space Invaders, but with people instead of computers. So I took the entire class out to the basketball court and gave them different roles and different tasks to do. So some students became the evil Space Invaders moving around the screen, about to attack the Earth. Some were the player running from left to right. Some students were the bullets as they whizzed past. Another student kept score. Another student did the sound effects. And each one was working on their own little parts of the program code by acting it out for real. Before before they even touched a computer. And instantly, they could see how all of the pieces fitted together. They could see what made this old game just so fun and so exciting. And they were able to modify the game and improve it and practice it and act it out. So they were acting out computer programs before they programmed them. They then went into the studio to program and code for real. It was a fantastic way of using a very playful method to teach a very complicated subject with really, really fast results. So no matter how tricky it is, there's always room for play. Now, we can play at work, and we should definitely be playing with our kids, and we should be encouraging people to play and take risks. But sometimes play goes wrong. Sometimes there's the danger that something is not going to work. And this is one of the biggest problems in the workplace. What happens if you do something and it goes wrong, and maybe you get fired because you played a game and it was a complete disaster? Well, the good news is I've got a solution for you. There's something that works really well, and it's called a crisis ritual. A crisis ritual is when something goes terribly, terribly wrong, you're ready for it, and you react in a nice way every time that there's a problem, and you react in a consistent way every time that there's a problem. Usually, when something goes wrong, we have certain scales, don't we? Is it a little thing? Is it medium? Or, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing in the world ever. But actually, all problems are kind of the same, so we should treat them the same. And the British are really, really good at this. Because no matter what problem you have, it could be that your dog died this morning, that your wife left you, that you missed the bus. It doesn't matter how bad it gets, they will always say, every Brit will say, I'll make a cup of tea. So it's true. So no matter what happens to a Brit, they always drink a cup of tea, and then the crisis is over. And you can use this in your workplace too. And it doesn't have to be a cup of tea, but as long as you consistently deal with your problems in a nice way, it can be wonderful. One of my favorite things was working with a company that implemented a sombrero of shame. Every time there was a problem, whoever had caused the problem, they just had to wear a big sombrero on their head, and that was it. And if you wanted to talk to the person about the problem, they had to wear a sombrero too. So if your boss comes down, it's like a Mexican showdown rather than a problem. And I've got to tell you, no matter how bad it gets, when you're wearing a sombrero, it's still fun, and your boss is never going to fire you whilst wearing a sombrero. Trust me on this. So these are some examples, but like I said before, it's not enough just to have good ideas. We have to live them, and anything can happen. So I'd like you to do one thing for me. I'd like you to play. And here, in the last 1 minute and 26 seconds, I present my opportunity for play. Can we have this up here, please? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you can do what you want as long as you do exactly what you want. Here you go. Thank you. Thank you very much.